Hello and welcome to the Truthful Misconceptions podcast. Today we're going to talk about Islam and how it's been used throughout history, not just as faith, but a system of political and cultural power, and why understanding that history is critical for today. From Egypt to North Africa, from Persia to the Levant, Islamic empires didn't just spread religion, they reshaped societies, languages, laws, and identities. Some civilizations adapted, some resisted, some were transformed entirely over centuries. And these patterns aren't just history lessons. They set the stage for what's happening now in Israel and what liberal societies in Europe and the United States need to understand if they want to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. Let's start at the beginning with Egypt. Egypt, the fall of the Coptic civilization. Before Islam arrived, Egypt was a Coptic Christian nation. They spoke Coptic, the descendant from ancient Egyptian, the religion Christianity, deeply rooted in Egyptian society. Then came the Arab Muslim conquest of 639 to 642 CE. Byzantine control collapsed. Arabic became the language of administration. Islam gradually became a dominant religion. The Coptic identity survived, but as a minority. This pattern, military conquest, political control, legal structures favoring new rulers, gradual cultural assimilation is a pattern we'll see repeatedly. North Africa. In the Maghreb, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, and Tanzania, people of the Amazigh and the Tunisians, descendants of Carthage, thrived for centuries. Arab Muslim armies arrived in the 7th to 8th centuries. Some resisted fiercely, like Queen Dia in Morocco, but Arabic language and Islam eventually replaced the local governance and culture. Carthaginian and Punic traditions disappeared over centuries. Amazigh identities survived in pockets, but Arab Islam influence dominates. The Levant. Syria and Lebanon were home to Aramaic-speaking Christians before Islam. In the 630s, Islamic conquest brought Arabization and political dominance. Arabic replaced Aramaic in public life. Islam became dominant politically, even as some communities retained their religious identities. This region mirrors what happened in Egypt: conquest, political control, cultural transformations. And this brings us to Israel, a land that experienced the same centuries-long Islamic influence, but today represents a reversal of that pattern. Iraq, with its Mesopotamian, Assyrian, and Babylonian roots, fell to Arab Muslim armies during the collapse of the Sasanian Empire in 633 to 651 CE. The local population became politically subordinate. Arabic replaced Aramaic. Islam became dominant. Mesopotamian culture survived in fragments, but political and religious authority had shifted. Persia, home of the Zoroastrians and Sasanian Empire, fell in the mid-7th century. The state collapsed. Zoroastrians became marginalized. Persian culture and language survived, but Islam became the dominant worldview. Here we had subtlety. You can keep your language and traditions, but political and religious authority changed as a rule of life. In the Sudan, kingdoms of Makaru, Nubitia, and Lodia were Christian. Treaties initially preserved autonomy, but Islam spread gradually through trade, intermarriage, and legal pressures. Over generations, Islamic influence reshaped society. Kurdistan. In Kurdish regions, Zoroastrians and local traditions existed before the Arab Muslim conquest. Incorporated into Islamic empires came gradually, but over time, Islam became dominant. The indigenous religion survived only in small pockets. Somalia. Somalia shows a slightly different pattern. Islam arrived mostly through trade and cultural influences rather than direct conquest. Over centuries, Islam became the dominant religion, shaping law, identity, and culture, demonstrating that expansion can be subtle, not only military. Now let's focus on Israel. Many today assume Palestine is an ancient, continuous nation, but historically that's not correct. The name Palestine was first used by Romans in 135 CE after crushing the Jewish revolt as a way to erase Jewish sovereignty. Later empires, Byzantine, Islamic, and Ottoman, used it only as a province or a district, not as a sovereign state. British mandate for Palestine between 1920 and 1948 was the first official political use of the name. Palestinian national identity only emerged in the 20th century, largely in a response to Zionism. Israel represents a restoration of the indigenous civilization, interrupting over a millennium of Islamic political and cultural dominance in the region. Modern extreme examples. History is not just the past. It echoes today. Across the globe, some extremist rhetoric reflects patterns we've seen for centuries. In Dearborn, Michigan, protesters carried the sign saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," signaling the goal of replacing Israeli sovereignty. Some imams in the United States have openly called for Islam to be in every home, advocating political and cultural dominance. Extremist acts, including publicly shouting Allahu Akbar, followed by violence, demonstrate some of the interpretations of Islamic law still inspiring coercion and terror. These are real threats, not theatrical. Governments in Europe and the United States recognize this, prosecuting, deporting individuals who cross that line from belief to incitement. Modern implications. Fast forward to society today, liberal policies often go to extremes in the name of tolerance. Muslim prayer is often accommodated in schools, workplaces, and public institutions. Meanwhile, Christian traditions are sometimes restricted or discouraged under neutrality laws. This is asymmetric tolerance, often well-intentioned but naive. It fails to account for history, for the political dimensions of some religious beliefs, and for the lessons of past civilizations that were slowly transformed or erased. Europe is beginning to wake up. Restrictions on radical preachings, deportations, and laws protecting secular governance reflect a recognition that unchecked ideology influenced can destabilize societies. The United States hasn't fully confronted this risk. Without historical awareness, without consistent application of secular principles, patterns of cultural and political pressures could repeat here. History doesn't need everyone to agree to repeat itself. It only needs enough people to look away. Every civilization that fell thought it was too advanced, too tolerant, too enlightened to be overtaken. They trusted that the warning signs were exaggerated, that accommodation was harmless, that silence would bring peace. They were wrong. It was suicidal empathy. Cultures don't disappear because they were conquered by force. They disappear because they stop defending themselves, their laws, their values, their identity. You don't have to hate anyone to acknowledge history. You don't have to reject immigrants to defend secular society. You don't have to deny religious freedoms to insist that no religion dominates public life. But you do have to be awake, because history has one thing in common. It doesn't whisper forever. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already been normalized. History doesn't just repeat, it punishes those who ignore it.